One consequence of Hollywood being dominated by superheroes and franchises is that by the time you're my age, you've seen about 6,000 action set pieces. Some are spectacular, many are not. And it's pretty easy to distinguish between the two because the reaction is physical. Has adrenaline been released into your system or not? Are you gripping your armrests or not? After watching all these set pieces, I think we've sort of been forced to develop an intuitive sophistication about them. There are no shortcuts to thrilling an audience that's absolutely drowning in this stuff. We recognize and champion good work when we see and feel it. I think that's the secret to the success of franchises like Mission Impossible, Fast and Furious, and John Wick. These are movies that are committed to well-choreographed, well-edited, real action. Okay, not always real. Tom Cruise understands exactly what he's offering. 3 or 4 genuinely creative set pieces with a serviceable plot that doesn't take itself too seriously and a few charismatic actors can be a really fun movie-going experience, well worth the price of a ticket. In fact, this formula, I think, in many ways defines the strategy of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, some of those movies are undoubtedly better than this, some are unfortunately worse. But they've tried their best to hew to this baseline, and I think it's worked out pretty well for them.
Anyone else?
Every ingredient matters, of course, but the Marvel set pieces have been really consistent by and large, and they're probably the things that I remember most when I think back on these movies. Now, I know there's a certain amount of fatigue these days about superhero films. I feel that way too, more and more, but you know, if I ever think back to my expectations as a kid for what big screen superhero team-up fights would be like, I mean, this definitely exceeds them.
That thing does not obey the laws of physics at all.
Look, kid, there's a lot going on here that you don't understand.
Stark said you'd say that. Wow.
The sad part about this is that, as a kid, I read DC comics, not Marvel comics. And unfortunately, the DC Extended Universe set pieces leave a lot to be desired. There are a lot of reasons for this, I think, that people have explored before. Zack Snyder's preference for stylized coloring versus the more muted cinematography of the MCU, the overuse of super slow motion, and ridiculous virtual camera moves like this. But there are a few other things I want to point out that I think make a bigger difference when it comes to superhero set pieces. The first is that physics matters. We all know that superheroes do a lot of absurd things. Half the shots that Iron Man takes would be fatal blows, but people have an intuitive sense for weight and velocity and impact, which is why in-camera action usually gets a more visceral response from audiences. The physics